Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Welcome back.
We are happy to have you here with us.
We're so excited about this episode. This is an episode that we didn't have a tease for last episode.
Right. That's true.
And that's because we couldn't tell you who was going to be on. No, that's not true. It's because we didn't know that they would say yes. I think that's
true.
What it is.
We were hoping. We had like the fingers crossed.
Yeah, we had fingers
like,
crossed.
Oh,
like, is he going to be on there?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know when.
Yeah.
So
we'd like to, formally introduce you all to our dear mentor, colleague,
teacher,
colleague,
friend.
Yes.
Client at one point.
Yeah. We've known Chris Perry for the last 12 years.
12 for you?
For me, yeah. Probably like 14
So probably
for
14,
you.
15 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's one of the reasons why, I think for me, the main reason why I even got into
Definitely.
animation in the first place.
100%. The only reason I'm in animation is because of Chris.
Yeah. I like to say, when people ask me like how I first got excited to be in animation, it actually came from Chris's first animation 1 class.
Yeah. Okay.
Where,
you tell a short story. I'll tell a short story.
Okay, great.
Here we go.
So my short story is that I went into the class. I was a UMass student.
Short story.
So sure. So I wasn't sure if I was going to get into the class. So that's all I was going to say because it was at a different college. And I'll never forget, he opened up Autodesk Maya. He put a cube, a gray anonymous cube onto the screen, set a keyframe, made it move, and I said, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Nice.
That's it.
Nice.
Like the spark was there instantly.
That's a great moment.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm always grateful to he's part of my origin story.
Yeah, here's my origin story. I applied for his class. He denied me.
Oh, he's looking at you.
Oh, I'm giving you the bombastic side eye. Then,
I don't think you know what that means.
No, I don't think so either. Then I applied to his second class as Anim. No. I took another class with a different professor. That's what it was. It was like Anim 1 or something.
Sure.
I think I was in the back of my head like, I need to prove it to that guy that I'm good. You know what I mean? Like I had some other motivation that had nothing to do with the class. At the end of that class, he comes over and he says, hey, maybe you should take my Anim 3 class because your work is great. And I had skipped Anim 2. He like pushed me through to the next class.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, of course I belong over there. Yeah. It's my work ethic
Well, he recognized your work ethic for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been an inspiration to us over the years. He's guided us in a lot of different ways.
Maybe let's talk a little bit more about his accolades on his behalf. So Chris used to be the professor of media arts and sciences at Hampshire College, was where we all met.
Right. Prior to that, he worked at places like Rhythm and Hues and Pixar. That
one
little studio
that's
you might
a small tiny.
Yeah.
I don't do. Does anyone know who Pixar is? I'm not sure. He's been honored by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for a Technical Achievement Award. He's also a member of the Writers Guild of America, the WGA.
And he's worked on a number of projects over the years that have really kind of pushed the boundaries of technology.
Yeah.
In a way that for us, we had the pleasure of being able to work on.
Something I love about Chris is that he's always pushing everyone to do better at whatever they're doing.
Right. Better storytelling, better art,
better storytelling, better art, better animation, better that camera choice, make it better. That color choice, make it better. Like it's just always about improvement.
To give you all kind of a new term from the art industry, CBBs are a big thing. CBBs means could be better.
Could be better.
So
we have a list of CBBs of this podcast somewhere in our Google Drives. And we will make the podcast better.
Right.
But he's an animation veteran. It's about 20 years plus of experience at this point.
And we've just always had really good conversations with him over the years.
And he has an independent studio called Bit Films, great name, where he showcases a bunch of his work there as well. And you can see some of the work that we've done. Did you work on Tower 37?
I worked on Caldera.
I originally worked with him on Tower 37, and then we worked on New Pioneers together.
Yes.
and that was something that he hired our old studio for.
And maybe we'll link some of those in the description.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, so you can 100%. Check them out if you're interested in short films and animation.
He also has a book that we mentioned in the podcast, but we'll mention it again here because it's an amazing book.
Yeah.
Called SceneWriting. SceneWriting.
Not
screenwriting.
SceneWriting.
SceneWriting.
Yes.
So
co-written with Eric Sanders.
Yes. Shout out to Eric Sanders.
And it's exactly what it sounds like. It is the missing manual for script writing. So it basically guides you through the process of writing a script if that's something you've never done before. I personally got to test it out over the last year and wrote my very first script, and it was wonderful. And I'm really grateful for that.
Still working on mine. My script is.
We're gonna workshop it a little.
It's about Mr. Clean. Anyway, so I'm excited. Let's just jump in.
Let's do it.
All right.
Well, Chris, we are delighted to have you on.
I'm super excited.
Yes, I'm excited for the conversation. For our audience who might not know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Nickelodeon and maybe in a past life where you've been?
Depends how much time we have. I've had a few past lives. Well, I guess we'll start with the most recent, which is I've been supervising director on a new show at Nickelodeon called Max and the Midnights. Hopefully you'll see it sometime in 2024. I don't know for sure. And what a supervising director does, well, to explain it, I want to define a little bit about how we make shows at Nick. So there's a team that is, we call it local, even though there's a lot of remote workers now, but there's like the Nickelodeon team for the show that writes the scripts, does the character design, and then creates animatics, which is that a term I can assume your audience members understand?
Yes, we did a whole episode about it. So
nice.
Yes.
So, and then we work with a vendor studio who will produce animation for us based on all that material. And really, so for me, my priority was I was responsible for making sure that the animatics were the highest quality we could get with the time and the budget that we had. And so the job is really about translating the scripts that we get to some sort of visual treatment. So we get voice records, we choose our shots, we choose performances, we add rough musical cues on top, sound effects cues, and we deliver what we think is a pretty compelling animatic that you can watch and kind of really understand what the episode's going to be like without really having done any of the final CG that would be in there. So that was my most recent responsibility, and before that I taught for many years at Hampshire College where we all met.
Yes.
I'd like to take some credit for you two finding each other and connecting.
You should hear the intro.
Oh, really? Okay, perfect. Yeah. And at Hampshire, I was teaching animation and screenwriting for quite some time, and in parallel with that, cultivating my own skills as a writer and director, which ultimately led to this current gig at Nick.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I don't think I've ever asked, like, what got you interested in writing work to begin with? Like, what sparked that?
Oh, my God. Very specific moment. So, I was living in LA and working in the visual effects business as a technical director / programmer. So I was on the code side and on the technical side of making visual effects. And I was living with a bunch of guys. It was one of those 5 people in one house situations, as a lot of people do after grad school or undergrad. And one of my roommates knew that I loved this book. The book was Ender's Game. I loved the book by Orson Scott Card. And he was in some job, I forget where he was, but a script came across his desk for an Ender's Game movie. This is years before they actually made the movie, and this was not the script that resulted in the movie. But he left it. He's like, "Here, I thought you might be interested in this." I'd never read a script before. I sat there, I opened it, and 2 hours later, I was like, "Oh my God, that was such an incredible experience. It was like watching a movie. and this definitely is not a good version of Ender's Game. So it was two things happen at once. I loved what that medium as its own little sub-medium, like on its way to being a film, how that worked and how it made me feel and the experience it gave me. And I also thought that person didn't do a good job of capturing the book that I had loved. And so that put the spark in my mind of like, I wonder if I could do this. And then it got reinforced multiple times over in the visual effects field. The other moment that I can point to was going to a cast and crew screening of the film Kazam, where Shaquille O'Neal is a genie, comes out of a boombox. I worked on that.
A classic.
It definitely. But I went to the cast and crew screening, and it was really, the environment was really celebratory and exciting. And I watched the movie, and I felt really disappointed because I felt like we had put all this really great effort into something that ultimately it didn't move me in a way that I wanted work that I'm putting my life and love into to move me. And so that was another one that reinforced the path for me of, well, if you're going to complain about what other people are doing, try doing it yourself and see how it goes. So that's the long answer to your question.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think there's something to that like to our audience, a lot of the people that, we know are either copywriters or they're thinking about marketing in a slightly different way from more of a storytelling perspective. And I think that comes a little bit from that feeling of like, we've been using marketing to sell our products over and over and over again. We need to focus on the story side of things because that's where the passion comes from.
Yeah. And we were right before you jumped on, we were talking about the Barbie movie as a marketing play. Like that, the entire movie is a marketing play. Yeah. But they're telling a very interesting and compelling story. I don't know if you've seen.
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you think about it? How much Kenergy do you think?
Do you on a daily basis?
I am Knuff. That's what I think.
We're gonna get everybody matching T-shirts.
We're gonna get letters in the mail.
But that's cool. Yeah. So
I you've written a book on writing, which we
that I have followed and
been following it.
Yes, and it has been amazing. To quickly plug it, it's called SceneWriting. The missing manual. Thank you for scriptwriters. Which is amazing. It's really.
And you co-wrote that with someone.
Yes.
Eric Sanders.
Yep.
Yeah.
So shout out to him.
Definitely. Go if you're ever looking to write good stories and good scripts, that's the book to go get.
100%. So I wanted to sort of give him a little taste here. So can you describe a basic story structure from your perspective here? How should communication professionals be telling more compelling stories?
Well, first of all, rewind. Why are we communicating at all? And typically it's to I want to convey some information to you. Or you want to convey information to the minds of consumers or audiences of some sort. That's underlying all of this communication is some information that needs to be passed on. And in the book, we talk about that a really great scene definitely has to provide that information. Like it just doesn't work if the scene doesn't further the story in some way. But it also needs to be engaging. And engaging is a somewhat squishy term. We spend a whole chapter talking about it, but it's that quality of, do you want to put it down or not? Do you find it compelling? Do you want to turn the page and keep reading? And that I think is that's a key element. I think probably everybody in your circles knows what they want to communicate. They come in with a message, and maybe they don't. I mean, maybe there's like branding choices and things that people need to come up with where they're like, we're not sure where to go and which version of us we'd like to present. But whenever you've decided that, the engagement part, I think, is the key part, and that's where you're free to break rules. There's all these books say like, this is how you do it. This is the way it has to be done, and by this page you have to have done this, and by this thing you have to do this. That only exists because those things kind of work. They've captured a sort of structure that resonates with people. But, for every 10 examples that follow some kind of model, there's one just mind-blowingly different thing that does something in a crazy way, and you're suddenly hooked by it. And so I think that the marriage of engagement and information is really key for telling stories that are appealing.
How does it? So I'm trying to think about what you just said, and does the different type of storytelling change the way I should be thinking about my writing?
You mean like animation versus live action, or
you can tell stories again. So Barbie being a good example of a marketing decision to say, hey, we should put out a movie and it'll sell all these things, and but we can also tell this story. What if I'm not Mattel, right? What if I'm a smaller company, or maybe I'm a nonprofit organization and I'm trying to convey a particular message around something that has to do with changing how people vote or something like that. And I want to do that. I'm maybe contemplating in my head, is it live action? Is it animation? How do I do this? Does that change how I approach my story?
I don't think so. I don't think it should. Okay. Honestly, there's this writer's strike going on right now, and a lot of people ask, oh, does it impact you? And I am a member of the Writers Guild, but there's also the Animation Guild, which covers animation writing, and not all animation projects are guild projects. So, and it's historical, and I don't even know all the reasons why there are two guilds, but the processes are the same. You're still conveying information and trying to do it in an engaging way. And so I'm frustrated that they are kept separate. I'm frustrated when people call animation a genre, because there are adult animated films and animated dramas, and that it's just another way of making things. So no, I don't think I don't think of the writing process any differently between the two. And I think that you guys were plugging the book. Thank you. I think that if you're writing a novel and you want to make a chapter that really resonates with people, you'll probably be following a lot of the same things that someone who writes a scene would be following. So I mean, I'm broadening it out even beyond scripts for animation or live action, and just saying that the general act of communicating. If you're a comedian doing a stand-up routine, same deal. You're so anyway. So no, I don't think you should think of them differently.
So we're developing something internally right now, and we were discussing what comes first. Is it character development, or is it story development?
Ooh.
And
is it a chicken and the egg situation?
Is it a chicken and the egg situation? And we stand on different sides. I'm not going to tell you which side we stand on because I want you to tell us what the right answer is, and then we can.
Oh wait, then one of you is going to shame the other one for being wrong. Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm getting in the middle of a spat here, and I'm going to be used. Okay. Well, no, you know what? I'll make it easy. I don't think there is a right way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, well, you can do neither in a vacuum. Like you could start with character. If you ignore plot and story, you will struggle. And if you start with plot and you just try to ignore character, you will also struggle. So I think that it's a two-handed conversation. Like you might start, you might like for me, a lot of my ideas start with a high concept, thing that hits me in a dream, or, what if this following thing happened, and it's more plot driven. And I write it down and I think, oh, wow, that's really cool. But you can't tell a story with just plot.
Right.
And so then you think, okay, who's the right character to be with through this journey, right? Let's say there's like a story like Contact. You guys know Contact, the Carl Sagan book, and then the great movie with Jodie Foster. The sort of plot thing is Contact is made with some alien species, some extraterrestrial force has made contact. That's exciting plot stuff. Who's the character? Who are the people involved in that? And why do we care about them? And you've got this young female scientist, and then you've got this kind of religious figure who I think was played by Matthew McConaughey in the film, if I remember correctly, who's, asking kind of these important questions, because as soon as contact with extraterrestrial intelligence comes up, it becomes less about science and more about, well, what should we do? and is this going to be good for us, and does it make you question things like the existence of God and blah blah blah, and so the story is about this kind of ongoing discussion and debate between these two, and this idea of faith, and ultimately the scientist and Jodie Foster has to make this leap of faith, which is not in her wheelhouse. It's not who she is. She comes at it from a pure science perspective, but her journey is one where she has to embrace the faith part of it, and that science is not all black and white, cut and dry, scientific method, yada yada yada. That you get into spaces that are squishier, and so that's where it's this great marriage of you found the right character to go on the right journey with this story point of, okay, we discovered extraterrestrial intelligence. What do we do next?
Right. You're talking a lot about. I mean, this was a great example of kind of going a little bit more in depth into that development process that I think oftentimes gets sort of ignored in the marketing side. There's like a piece where sometimes when we get an animation, we'll say, they'll come to us and say, hey, we have this project, we kind of know what we want, and it's due in 2 weeks. And we say, okay, great. Like, how do we take the time to, know when to analyze and when we're over analyzing and saying, okay, we need to stick back to sort of the main goal here. But I think there's something around this question about how much time should we give for this development phase that I think is needed for every project that you work on to get to that deeper story.
I don't know the answer, but the great news is that the script is the really fast way to figure it out. Like the script is not rallying a team of artists across the globe, doing slow keyframe animation work, doing, precise character design work. You can, as you develop your skills as a writer, you can really efficiently put out something that if it works on the page, then you can be pretty hopeful it's going to work maybe even better in execution. If it's not working on the page, that is kind of a cheap way to say, oh, we have to reassess. We have to revise and iterate. And I think if I were a client, it would be hard. I don't want to hear we're going to spend a week of our 2 weeks rewriting this thing, because I'd be terrified by that. But
right, but it's kind of justifying a little bit of the cost side of that, right? The fact that like you can save so much time by diving into the script now and making those changes and understanding the story and how everything's reflected before you get into any concepting, any animation work. So that, we've definitely mentioned that before, where it's like, if you go into animation and then you change out the entire script, you're
starting over. Yeah,
it's right. Yeah, exactly.
I think there's another approach here that we see a lot in collaborating with other people, where they approach it design first instead of all the character work that we're talking about is written character work. To me, it's like defining who the character is, where they're from, some history, some descriptors, that kind of thing. But a lot of people in the marketing world approach it with, we need a character, but let's just design the character and let's lead with what that design is. And that somehow shapes the character more than what they represent.
It's interesting approaches. And I kind of, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I'd be hard pressed to say that was somehow wrong, because I think everybody needs a North Star. They need the thing to guide them. And if the client is looking at this thing and goes, that's us, that character captures what we're trying to do. Yeah. That's like a helpful beacon for everybody involved in the process. And so if you think visually, then writing a script isn't going to be where you start necessarily, right? But if you can get that North Star identified, it helps everybody on the creative process, like unite.
That's very true.
So it sounds like there are 3 starting points. And none of them are wrong.
Right.
So we're just let me just throw that out there. You can start with design, you can start with character descriptions, or you could start with plot. That's any one of those is great.
Yeah. And once they merge together, that's where the
magic happens.
Magic happens.
That's where the magic
happens. 100%. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, so it makes me think a little bit, because we're kind of getting into production and workflow a little bit more deeply.
We're deep
here.
In the weeds here.
Yeah. So what would you say, what do you think makes production workflows smoother on both the creative side and the business side? You know, are there common points of like friction that happen, especially at, you know, as companies scale and when you're working with larger teams? Like, do the same points of friction apply, or are there new levels that come up
just to
along the
give you a
way?
little background too? Like I've been in meetings with like 11 people,
Right?
and there's the head of the company, here's the head of marketing, here's, you know, the agency that we're working with, here's the production company that we're working with, and then there's me.
Here's the safety committee that has to be involved, the league, the
and
compliance review.
Everyone is looking at my work and critiquing it. And so that was really easy because it was everyone in one room, and it was like boom, 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 boom. I'll write down the thing, and that's it. Okay. So it doesn't always happen that way.
Well, I would say this, a great segue, because I think having that North Star, having that beacon, having those stakes in the ground that you can point to and say, this is it, and it's this, not that, that's really helpful for steering something, right? You can always go back. So you know, in the show that I've been on, I'm in situations sometimes where I have to advise someone without the showrunners in the room, and that's like my job is in part to help execute the vision of the show, even though it wasn't originally my vision. So my job has been to try to understand their vision, and I only got there through all those North Stars and many conversations, and you know, then I get entrusted with that, and I can then advise people so that when the showrunners see the work, they're seeing something they expect and something that they are happy with. Hopefully, that's the goal. Is that this team of, you know, many people is going to create something that works for the unified vision of the project. In terms of friction points, I think the noting process is a really interesting friction point.
Sorry, could you define noting,
or is
noting
that a
process
different?
for us?
Yeah.
Let's okay. So, well, you were talking about your example of being in the room with 11 people, where you're collecting input on your work. That is a form of a noting process. You're getting the input where someone says, "Oh, I like this part. I didn't like this part. Or this felt too sudden. Or this was too blue. Or whatever." You know.
Our clients would call that like a review.
Great.
Or something like
Great.
that. Review session.
Great.
Yeah. Yep.
So, when I think of collecting notes and acting on notes, I think of basically all those different reviews and the way that they can occur. So you know, let's pretend that your group was not all in the same room. Let's say you get an email from the president of the company, you get a phone call with the people who are the safety compliance people, you have lunch with the people from the ad agency, right? Like, so over the course of a week, let's say you finish up a draft, you ship it out, and over the course of a week, you get all of this input from all these different sources. Your job is to collect that, translate it, because if someone says like, I didn't like this part, that's not actionable, right? If someone says this character needs to say Frank instead of Felicia, that's actionable. You can just like act on it right away and it's easy. But when they say, I didn't like this part got slow for me, that's when you have to, first of all, figure out what the note is behind the note. Right? Why?
The intention.
Yeah. Why does that suck? Why does this person not like this moment? The sources are coming in from so many different places and so many different times and so many different backgrounds. That's hard to do. And you might have your meeting where you collect and process and filter the notes, and then, oh God, someone who hadn't chimed in within the deadline still chimes in, and you don't want to upset your clients. You want to do the best thing you can do, right? And so how do you integrate that stuff when it comes in after the process? Of course, you can just say, hey, it came in late, we can't deal with it, but none of us want to do work that's less than great, right? We're all interested in doing the best work we can. And if you get good input, even if it's late, you want to act on it. So now make it more complex. Add in the fact that we're talking about a particular instance of a particular visual treatment of something. Okay, so we're looking at version 2, animatic, dated this date. Someone says this part is slow. What part are they talking about? Do they refer to it by time code? Do they refer to it by frame number? Do they refer to it on an online like video noting service, or are they typing it into an email to you? And so and then someone else, say, puts a note on some sort of online, feedback thing, those two notes maybe are related to the same part, but they're coming in two different sources, and someone has to unify them and connect them and go, oh, they're both talking about this part. So there's the filtering and the translating of notes. Once that's done, I think it's pretty straightforward to act on them, because you're like, okay, these are more important than those. Let's do these first. You can pass them on.
Right.
But I just find
no
that process of collecting and filtering and parsing the notes is really hard. There's not a great tool for it. I've tried a dozen.
Right.
Yep.
You don't want, like, let's say that you're really visual, Kathryn, and Will's very verbal, and like, I want you to give notes in the way that works for you. So maybe you're like scribbling on a piece of white paper and sending me scans, and Will's typing something into an email or a spreadsheet. Both great notes, completely different. I have to open them in different viewers, right? Like, so anyway, this is a big thorny.
One's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You don't have Microsoft. You got to install Microsoft.
So we spend so much time and energy dealing with these types of things. It drives me crazy.
Well, because it also runs into that idea of, like, especially when you're dealing with bigger production companies too, there's like things that happen at scale when, like, if everybody's sort of playing this game of telephone, is there a point when the translation gets lost between what the feedback was originally, going all the way down to the fix and being like, that's not what I asked for.
Especially if your method of communicating your note is something like a phone call.
Right.
If I'm feeding you a phone call, you might translate
I'm trying to
it differently.
jot the notes down.
And I might interpret it entirely different once it gets to me. Like, it's literally a game of telephone.
I agree. That happens a lot too. Is we're sitting there talking, and someone says, like, no, I don't think that's what they meant. I was there.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I'm just reading what you sent, but I was there in the meeting, and no, they added something else that we didn't capture, and I think it's more like this. So, right. Yeah, I agree. That's another big piece of it.
On the client side there, whoever that person is that has to be the one to give feedback, like, what might you recommend to them in terms of, like, is it that they might need more guidance? We've talked about this before, where, like, at every stage we try to provide some, like, guiding questions to be like, this is what we're looking for from a feedback standpoint at this point. But yeah, I'm kind of curious if there's, like, tools or things that the client could have in their back end tool belt to help mitigate that.
Let's make them a cheat sheet right now. What can they do to make it clearer for us?
I think that inviting a certain kind of feedback is a really good idea. We do that a lot, like early animatic. We don't want notes on performance. We want notes on shot selection and, pacing. That requires educating people, because, again, if you're not in the space very deep, you're going to look at something and say, that looks like a bunch of stick figures running around. And you're like, well, that's because that's what it is. And trust us, those stick figures will be replaced with something else, and it'll look really great.
They're gonna look amazing.
Exactly. So I think that education is helpful, but still, I want to put the fewest number of impediments between the client and the notes. I want them to be able to react in the way that's natural for them and capture it in a way that then we can use. Because again, with the translation process, if I'm forcing you, let's say you're not very technical, and I'm sending you to some website where you have to, like, click and drag and right mouse and do this and do that and hit enter, and if your note doesn't go in, you don't know what, like, I don't want to frustrate you just giving notes. I want the notes to feel like a conversation, and just to have you say what's on your mind and leave the interpretation up to us. So that's another piece of it, is, the people who you want notes from, they're generally busy people who care a lot about what's going on and will have valuable input. And so slow them down unnecessarily sounds to me like a mistake. Now, it might be that there's the sort of right amount that greases the skids a little bit, so that when the notes do come in, it doesn't create such a headache on our end. But the dream answer for me is one that lets people react in a way that's very native to them. So if they're an illustrator, they can scribble and draw. And if they're a writer, they can type. And if they're a spreadsheet person, they can spreadsheet it. Like, whatever works for you, I'd love to make that possible. And so it maybe means that someone's got to create a kind of generalized interface to the same system that has different modes of working.
Yeah, it's like adaptable.
Yeah, adaptable to how you like to do it.
Yeah, I would love to see somebody give me a piece of feedback that's in a spreadsheet format.
Oh,
really?
I don't know what that would look like, but I'm so curious. Yeah,
I've gotten that.
I'm thinking like, yeah, would they put like formulas in? Like it's an elaborate
spreadsheet. No. Yeah, it's not. Well, you're not going to get that. What you're going to get is
shot 6
sentences that
here's the notes. Shot 7. Here's the notes.
Yeah.
It's So and similarly, like I'm one of those people who gives notes on our works in progress on the show, and I've done it. Thus far, I've done it 3 different ways, because the first way I tried, it worked well for our animation directors. It didn't work well for our showrunners, and so I adapted it a little bit. And now I'm doing something that works apparently better for our showrunners, but not as good for some other people. So I'm fine. Like I'm technically comfortable enough to learn a new thing and try it, but again, I don't, and it's my job to do that. So, but it's the client is paying to have something done, and so I don't want to give them a job other than please give us the notes, right? We want your feedback. So that's my biggest pain point
for them. Yeah.
I don't know if any business owners are listening, but if they are, I think what they forget is that there's a lot of time lost there in that translation, and it can lead to much bigger financial losses.
Right. Scope changes down
the road that you didn't see coming because this translation didn't work. The notes weren't passed on in the right way or anything like that. So, it's in your interest to figure out a nice solution.
Yes, please. Yeah. So, please.
Yeah. And having that conversation like right at the beginning of a project too, like I could see something we've done in the past is like asking a client at the beginning, what's your preferred communication style? Right. Are you an email person? Are you a text person? Are you we need to make sure that every feedback is a meeting that we have every single week. Like everybody's preference is going to be different there. So how do you, it's almost like, I feel like we're always in a way adapting to the needs of that client because we're put in a position where they're not expected to learn every part of the animation process, right? But they are getting educated a little bit along the way. But in a sense, like because we can pivot and change as needed, it feels like it makes more sense to go down that route as opposed to being like, hey, client, learn this brand new tool and like be forced to be on this thing that doesn't work for you in the same way. Yeah.
I like that idea, by the way, of at the beginning saying, look, here are the 3-4 ways that we can receive feedback. We can do calls, we can do emails, we could do text, we could do notes on this system. What's your preference? Like, we don't care which of these you choose, but these all work for us, and whichever one fits your style better, that's great. That sounds like a nice approach.
It hasn't failed us yet.
Good.
We try.
At least so far, yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit because we are talking about a little bit of technology and how that is changing. It's obviously at the center, I think, of these massive conflicts between studios and writers and all of that.
But it's happening in different places. There's technology on the business communication side. There's technology in the production tools that we're using
there's
to
new
make
technology
the work.
in the creative side. Yeah, there's a lot of new tech in different places. So where do you see this next wave of technology going? How do you think that will impact how we tell stories?
And I think that comes from a place of like, we've had many conversations over the years, and I think we've brought this up every like 5 years. I feel like we come back and we re-ask this question.
What do you think's going on out there?
What's happening in the world?
I've had the pleasure of living through a couple of revolutions, right? Like computer graphics did not exist as a commercial way of doing anything when I was a kid. But some vanguards pushed and tried and explored and made it happen. And then, during my professional lifetime, the first CG animated feature film came out in 1995. And now most animated films made are made using computer animation. Again, not all. There's still a lot of great stop motion and hand-drawn stuff. we're seeing movement right now with real time, the convergence of games and traditional traditional CG animation, which is traditional is only 30 years old or something like that.
Right.
I'm very, very invested in that space. I think it's amazing. The hardest part for me about animation has always been the fact that you come to a project with like some really clear idea in your mind of maybe it's a shot, maybe it's a moment, maybe it's a performance, and that's what's on your mind, and you have to like do a 180, put that on the shelf, and world build, character design, write a script, create lights, create a set, create models, create textures, and it's like maybe 6 months pass before you can see the first version of that thing that was what got you inspired in the first place to get started. And that's so maddening. And this is why I have so much great respect for the illustrators that I've worked with, and the painters who can capture that with their skills in a number of hours instead of 6 months. And then again, there's your North Star again. It's like, that's it. That there is what we need to make. Someone just drew it and captured it, and that's amazing. So I think the real time revolution, the use of game engine technology to create CG, it's the same way we've always made it. It just renders faster, basically,
Right.
which means that you can see better looking stuff sooner. Okay, so in my nightmare story of waiting 6 months, maybe it's only 2 months now, right, or a month or something like that. And so you can get where you were hoping to be sooner. That's amazing, and that's going to continue. And I think, okay, we'll bring in the bad words, AI, or the bad letters. Everybody's talking about AI. There are ethical concerns, of course, but as far as a technology is concerned, AI feels like another one of these things that will help speed up certain processes, but it will not replace the need for creative people. And then, it just won't. I'm seeing things online where people are like, I just made this with Runway, and look at it. The future of cinema is here now. And I watch it and I think, this film sucks. I look at it and I go, I'm like, it looks nice, but I'm not engaged. It's like the characters are speaking in monotone, and the images look great. So like, has AI arrived as a tool to allow you to create really compelling, often photoreal imagery quickly? Yes. So for someone like me who's not a painter or illustrator of any repute, like, great, that might be a really helpful tool in my toolbox to allow me to, like, let's say I was hiring you guys to do something for me. I could maybe use it as a stepping stone and say, like, kind of like this. I whip this thing up in Midjourney. It's kind of like this, but we need more red here, and I need the character's ears to be bigger, and blah, 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 blah. But it's not. I don't see the fundamental processes changing right now. They're just getting faster. They're just getting easier. We're getting better at going from words to pictures, which is ultimately what we do, right?
Yeah. Right. Do you see that example you kind of just brought up as like a sort of an invitation for the creative side to really speed up on the production front, to have that North Star to be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for? But would you apply that same idea to showing that to a potential client? Or does that put them in like the kind of wrong direction to be like, oh, it's kind of like this, but if it's not clicking yet, it might lead them astray? Is it, you know what I mean?
I do know what you're, I think I know what you're getting at. And I run into this every time I want to pitch something. If I want to pitch an idea for a show, part of me really wants to show you exactly the show that I'm pitching. Because I think if you saw it like I saw it, of course you'd say yes, because it's freaking great, right?
Yeah.
But if you're pitching someone, you're inviting them to collaborate with you. And if you've already made all the decisions and it doesn't perfectly resonate with them, which the odds of that happening are very, very small, then you're sort of closing the door right when you're trying to open it. You're closing the door on collaboration. And so, I mean, we worked on a project together, that New Pioneers thing that we did, where I was like, I was really excited about that. I still love it, right? And
Yes,
but
we do too.
I think it was too finished in a sense, because I'd go in and pitch a show idea verbally. People would be like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm getting it. And then I'd show them that, and you could sort of tell, like, oh, it's not what they thought it would be. Like, what they were imagining was something that they created based on what I was pitching verbally. And then I was like,
right.
But we've already done it, and here's what it is, and it's either take it or leave it. So I'm feeling more these days that leaving room for collaboration is really great. So I don't know if I was going to use, say, Midjourney or something to create a pitch deck, I'd make sure I did like a real shotgun approach of lots and lots of images, so that instead of saying, like, here's the picture that I want you to think of when you think of this show, I'd give a whole flavor deck of,
Right, here's the possibility.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we'd have moments like all of these, and then I'd include stuff that was original as well, if I could, and if we could afford it. And so that I think your question gets to the, like, okay, are you trying to foster a collaboration?
Yeah.
Or are you looking just for an investor? Or are you looking, like, right? And so the answer may differ depending on the nature of the conversation. But I've explored that space a little bit, and I think they're maybe sometimes too far, right? If you're like J.J. Abrams, then it's different. You could just, people want to work with you because you make hits, so you could show them exactly your vision of it, and maybe your history and cred will just get you the deal. But if you're someone like me coming off the street with like some crazy idea and not the track record, then you want more of a collaboration, I think.
Right. Speaking of crazy ideas, our Mr. Clean movie.
That's already in there. We put it at the front, but we'll put it in video as well. Listen, Mr. Clean is the next IP.
Right.
He's the next Barbie.
Here we go.
We're going to move from Mr. Clean to Miss Clean, his daughter.
Yeah.
Crazy
we'll get
backstory.
there. We'll get there.
And Mr. Clean, you've already, you can just put up the logo. You're done. Character design is done. If it looked anything different from that, no one's going to like it. He's got to have the gold earring.
Exactly right.
Yep.
I forgot he has a gold
earring.
Yeah, he does.
That's like the source of his power. What do you?
It's like the Green Lantern.
Oh wait, it's like the Green Lantern.
If you pull that off, does he become Mr. Dirty? Is that a thing?
Oh, it's like
maybe it's like
a
Jekyll
and Hyde.
It's a Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Yeah. You guys keep cooking it up. You keep cooking it up.
Yeah. We'll workshop it a couple times and we'll come back to you.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us here. It was amazing having you, and we're really, really happy that you took some time out of your day.
Yeah, I mean, we always, I think every conversation we have always sparks something new in me, and like I take away something that I'm like, oh yeah, we could implement it that way. What are we thinking? Yeah. Like there's so many. I think sharing, there's something to having fellow artists, creatives, mentors, like sharing their experiences and their perspectives that gives you something in return that you say, oh, now I have new information to go off of that is newly inspiring. So,
I'm always inspired by your work. I can't wait for the show to come out. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. So how could people either reach you or follow your work or or read your book? How can people go?
Well, the book's easy to find. We already plugged it at the head, but SceneWriting, and if it's not at your bookstore, ask them to get it. People have been doing that and getting it online, of course. I am Bit Films on the site formerly known as Twitter, and I don't post a lot, but every now and then, if I see something that is intriguing to me, I'll post there. But honestly, like, working on the show has been so all-consuming that I've been just kind of in my little hole, my little work hole. But reach out on LinkedIn, those types of places, and I'd be happy to chat. And I'm really grateful to have been invited and to chat with you guys today. I think it's really it's very much needed what you guys are up to with this podcast and with Open Pixel, and trying to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on what goes on, because I really think, we all met in the context of education, and that's what we were doing. That was our, we weren't just here's the one way you do things. We would talk about how to do it, and we try new things, and so I love that. Even so many years out of school, you guys are realizing like we're figuring this out as we go. Let's get people into the conversation. Let's talk about alternate ways of doing things, and continue to just push towards the best, smoothest, most efficient, most successful ways of getting this kind of work done. So I love that you're doing that, having that conversation publicly. I think it's great.
Oh,
so thank you.
We appreciate that. Yeah. It's always.
You're
always
welcome. You're welcome.
There it is. Well, thank you. Yes, we really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, good to see you both.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good to see you.